During the Cold War, the world lived in constant anticipation of a major conflict. The United States and the Soviet Union were building up their armies, testing weapons, and preparing for a scenario in which hostilities could break out at any moment. Europe was considered the most dangerous potential battleground. According to military strategists, massive armies, thousands of tanks, and millions of soldiers could collide there. A Soviet advance into the West was seen as almost inevitable in the event of war, and stopping it by conventional means seemed extremely difficult. This led the American military to develop a plan that today sounds like a nightmare. If the enemy could not be stopped, the idea was to destroy the very terrain they were advancing across. In the 1950s and 1960s, special portable nuclear devices were created, not for bombers or missiles, but for small covert teams. These devices could be secretly installed under bridges, in tunnels, at ports, on mountain passes, or even underwater near strategic targets. Essentially, they were nuclear mines. Their power was enough to demolish major structures, cause collapses and flooding, and create radioactive zones that were impassable. The plan was that in the event of war, these charges would be detonated at key points of the enemy's advance, turning roads and infrastructure into a deadly wasteland. The most chilling part was that these devices had to be installed by small groups of specially trained soldiers. They were taught to infiltrate enemy territory, operate nuclear mechanisms, and act under complete isolation. The charges weighed tens of kilograms and had to be carried by hand over long distances. Once installed, timers were activated, and the operatives had to escape to a safe distance. Survival chances were slim. The explosion could occur before they got away. And evacuation during war conditions was extremely difficult. These missions were, in essence, almost suicidal. It was planned that in the event of a large-scale conflict, Europe would be covered with a chain of nuclear detonations to halt the enemy's advance. The explosions would not only destroy enemy forces but also devastate cities, roads, farmland, and millions of civilians, including populations of allied countries. The radioactive contamination would render vast areas uninhabitable for years or even decades. The continent's economy would collapse, and the consequences would be felt worldwide. Yet such a scenario was considered acceptable if the alternative was total defeat. These devices actually existed and were stored at secret bases. They were regularly checked, maintained, and kept ready for use. Military units conducted exercises, practicing delivery and installation in realistic conditions. Officially, such plans were rarely discussed, as the very idea of detonating nuclear charges on Allied territory could have caused panic and political crises. Only decades later did the full extent of these radical contingency measures become known. Over time, strategies changed. The development of missile technology, early warning systems, and the concept of nuclear deterrence made such covert operations less relevant. Moreover, it became clear that using nuclear charges across densely populated Europe would trigger a catastrophe from which no side could benefit. Eventually, these devices were retired, and plans for their use were archived. This story illustrates just how desperate and frightening the logic of the Cold War was. In a world where any decision could lead to global catastrophe, governments were willing to take measures that today seem unthinkable. Victory in such a conflict could have meant the destruction of entire countries and the deaths of millions, including one's own allies. And perhaps it was this very realization that helped prevent the outbreak of a major war.